Christmas morning in Portland. The living room was thick with the smell of fake pine from the tree, mixed with cinnamon from the candles on the table. Wrapping paper was ripped to shreds, scattered all over the hardwood floor, like the whole house had just been through a little storm. Right in the middle of that mess, my sister Emily was spinning around, her bright red knit dress flying with every turn. In her hand was a shiny key, catching the glow of the twinkle lights on the tree. "Oh my God, my new Mercedes!" Emily screamed, her voice shaking with pure joy. My dad, Richard, stood with his arms crossed, chest puffed out like he'd just won some big award. My mom, Linda, held her hands to her chest, eyes sparkling, like she was watching a miracle unfold. Through the wide window, I saw it. A pearl white Mercedes parked in the driveway. It shimmered under the cold gray winter light, with a giant red bow on top, the kind you usually only see in car commercials during the holidays. I couldn't help but think, that bow alone probably cost more than the gift they just handed me. On my lap sat a cheap plastic piggy bank, shaped like a toy for kids. The price tag was still stuck on it. $1.50. My mom gave me a soft smile, nodding for me to open the little plastic plug at the bottom. I did, and two $1 bills slipped out, floating down like some cruel joke. "This is the start of your future house fund," my dad said, half serious, half teasing, then glanced over at Emily, as if sharing a private punchline. I just sat there, heart pounding, staring at the two bills in my hand. While my sister laughed and breathed in the smell of her brand new car, I finally understood something. To them, my worth today was exactly $2. And right then, a different kind of cold swept through my chest. Not from the damp Portland air outside, but from the truth I'd been trying so hard to ignore. My name's Clara Mitchell. I'm 34, living and working in Seattle. I'm a structural engineer, the kind of person everyone sees as hardworking, dependable, able to take care of herself. Just a few weeks before Christmas, I got promoted to senior structural engineer. Years of long hours, weekends sacrificed, all finally paid off. I pictured the moment I'd come home and tell my parents, hoping that maybe, for the first time in my life, I'd see pride light up in their eyes. My family lives in Portland, Oregon, about a 3-hour drive from Seattle, across snowy mountain passes. Their house sits in a quiet suburb with a big lawn and a driveway wide enough for 3 cars. Every winter, the roof gets covered in Christmas lights, so bright you can spot the house from down the street. From the outside, it looks like a picture-perfect American home. But inside, things were far from perfect. My dad, Richard, was the one who held the money, strict and always bragging. My mom, Linda, was more subtle, but she had this way of twisting emotions that left me guilty for wanting even the smallest bit of attention. And then there was Emily, my younger sister, 2 years behind me, working in graphic design. To my parents, she wasn't just the youngest. She was the jewel, the one to protect, to spoil, no matter the cost. I was different. Since I was a kid, they stuck a label on me: independent. If Emily wanted something, they'd bend over backwards to make it happen. If I asked, the answer was always, "You'll be fine. You're always fine." So I learned to handle everything myself. School, work, life. But deep down, I still longed for one simple thing. A word of praise. A look that said they saw me. Among the few keepsakes I've held on to, there's an old teddy bear my grandma gave me when I was 6. For me, it's a rare memory of unconditional love, the kind I never really got enough of from my parents. Every time I touched it, I saw that little girl again, the one who just wanted to be held, to be protected. But instead, she learned how to stand on her own. That Christmas trip to Portland, I came prepared. A sleek leather briefcase for Dad, a delicate silver bracelet for Mom, a camera lens Emily had once mentioned. I scraped together every dollar from my paycheck, hoping once again to prove my love, my responsibility. But as you already know from before, what I got in return was a cheap plastic piggy bank with 2 lonely dollar bills. That Christmas Eve didn't just shock me. It made me face a truth I'd been avoiding. For 34 years, I had never been the one who mattered most in my own family. From the outside, the Mitchells looked like any other middle-class American family. But inside, the difference in how they treated me and Emily kept repeating over and over until it became a pattern I knew by heart. I remember Emily's 5th birthday. My parents rented a whole farm outside the city. There were ponies for the kids to ride, a giant bounce castle, even a 3-tier princess cake. More than 30 kids from the neighborhood showed up, holding balloons, faces smeared with frosting. The whole party looked like something straight out of a Disneyland commercial. A year later, on my 6th birthday, my parents bought a square cake from Safeway. Plain, with a few wilted sugar flowers stuck on top. Only 2 kids from my kindergarten class came. We sat on folding chairs in the kitchen, blowing up cheap silver balloons. When I asked why my party wasn't like Emily's, my dad casually said, "You don't need a lot of friends. You're independent." That line became the chorus of my life. At my high school graduation, I was valedictorian. Standing on stage, giving my speech to the entire auditorium, I looked for my parents in the crowd. But their seats were empty. They had taken Emily to a soccer tournament in Eugene. When I called, my mom said, "We'll watch the recording. You know your sister needs encouragement." Then came college. I studied structural engineering, got a partial scholarship, but still had to borrow more than $70,000. I worked 25 hours a week at the library and the cafeteria, stretching myself thin just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Emily spent a year in Europe finding artistic inspiration, fully funded by my parents. I remember Dad's words clearly. "Your sister needs to explore, to figure herself out. You're different. You always know who you are." Every time they said, "You always know who you are," what they really meant was, "You don't need anything from us." But I did. I needed to be chosen. I needed to feel like my hard work was worth as much as their love and attention. Christmases were no different. Emily always got the big gifts. A MacBook, a trip to Aspen, a brand new camera. Me? I got practical things. Pots and pans, gas cards, sometimes just a cheap planner. My mom would smile and say, "We know you like useful things." Over time, I learned that expecting fairness only led to more disappointment. So I buried myself in work, thinking if I achieved enough, they'd finally see me. I finished every project at the firm, earned promotions, won respect from my coworkers. But every time I went home, I was still just Emily's sister. The independent one. The responsible one. Never someone worthy of love, for simply being me. For years, I clung to the hope that someday there would be a special moment. A day when my parents would finally look at me differently. I thought it would be the first time I got promoted. I thought it would be when I bought my first Toyota with money I earned myself. But each time the moment slipped away. At best, a short compliment. Then the spotlight went right back to Emily. And then that winter, in the warm glow of Christmas lights, with Emily laughing beside her brand new Mercedes while I sat there holding a plastic piggy bank with 2 crumpled dollar bills, I finally realized this cycle would never break on its own. If I wanted things to change, I had to be the one to break it. That moment, in the living room glowing with Christmas lights, the air around me felt so heavy I could barely breathe. Emily lounged on the sofa, twirling the Mercedes key like it was a piece of fine jewelry. My dad kept cracking jokes, my mom giggled along, and I sat there gripping that cheap plastic piggy bank so hard my fingers turned white. Mom urged me, "Go on, Clara. Open it. Maybe there's a surprise inside." I did. I popped off the flimsy plastic lid. 2 crumpled bills slipped out, landing on the glass table with a flat, hollow sound. For a second, the whole world went quiet. Then Dad spoke, half teasing, half serious. "This is your house fund. Just a small start. You've always been good with money, right? Not like some people." He winked at Emily, and the room filled with forced laughter. I couldn't even fake a smile. Emily leaned closer, the scent of her expensive perfume drifting my way. She patted my knee, her voice sweet but smug. "Don't worry, sis. If you ever need to go anywhere, I'll drive you in the Mercedes. That old Toyota of yours must be ready to retire by now. I almost laughed. That Toyota had carried me over snowy mountain passes, across endless job sites, through long days and longer nights. Most importantly, I'd paid it off myself. It was more reliable than any relationship in this house. Sitting there, I suddenly saw my 34 years flash by. The unfair birthdays, the empty seats at graduation, the loans I broke my back to pay off while Emily wandered through Europe. And now, once again, the proof that I'd never really been given a place that mattered. I set the piggy bank on the table. The hollow echo rang in my head. My throat tightened, but only one word came out. "Excuse me." I stood up, walked past the familiar staircase, down the hallway lined with family photos. In almost every frame, Emily's face shined, smiling, celebrated. And me? If I was there at all, I was off to the side. Behind the bathroom door, I leaned against the marble sink, staring straight into the mirror. My eyes were dry, no tears falling, but inside my chest, there was a crushing weight, like concrete hardening around my heart. For the first time in my life, I thought, maybe this is what it feels like when a heart starts to die. That night, I tossed and turned in my childhood room, listening to Emily's laughter echoing from downstairs. And in those long, dragging hours, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't staying here. Not for one more day. The clock on the nightstand flashed 2:17 a.m. I shot up in bed. I couldn't take it anymore. The laughter from Emily and my parents downstairs had faded, replaced by a heavy silence that wrapped around the house. It felt like I was trapped inside my own childhood memories, where every hope for fairness had been crushed. I turned on the small lamp, pulled an old suitcase from the closet. I didn't pack much, only the things that truly mattered. The teddy bear my grandma gave me, my college photo album, a little wooden box holding the first building design I ever sketched, the expensive gifts I'd bought for my parents, and Emily stayed under the Christmas tree. I knew they'd never be cherished the way I had hoped. As I walked down the stairs, I glanced at the family photo wall one last time. In every frame, Emily was in the center, smiling bright, celebrated. And me? Just a shadow on the edge. I stopped in the kitchen, set the house key on the counter beside the coffee maker, the one that always clicked on at 6 a.m. The moment my fingers left that cold key, I knew a whole chapter of my life had closed. Stepping outside, the Portland air hit me sharp and wet, the driveway damp with night fog. My 7-year-old Toyota Camry waited, its roof covered in frost, proof of all the miles it had carried me. I started the engine. The sound was rough, but steady. Unlike the shiny Mercedes parked out front, new but soulless, this car was my ally. It had never let me down. On I-5 at 3 in the morning, the road was empty. Just streetlights and a few heavy trucks rushing past. The radio played Bing Crosby's White Christmas. I turned it down, then off. I couldn't handle the irony. In the dark, I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Clara." My voice sounded like a stranger's. Snow came down thick as I drove, and memories poured in. Emily's 5th birthday with ponies and a bounce castle. My 6th with a cheap cake in the kitchen. My high school graduation, where my parents missed my valedictorian speech to take Emily to a soccer game. The college years, me buried in work and debt, while they sent her to Europe to find inspiration. Piece by piece, the truth was clear. I'd never been the one who mattered. A truck roared past, splashing dirty water across my windshield. For a few seconds, I drove blind, heart racing, hands clenched on the wheel. When the wipers cleared it away, tears finally spilled down my face. Not just from fear, but from the truth I couldn't ignore anymore. Dad controlled the money. Mom controlled the emotions. One used finances to play favorites. The other used feelings to cover it up. My phone buzzed. Mom's face lit up the screen. Not "Are you okay?" message. Instead, "Did you remember to pay the power bill for the cabin?" The same cabin they bought for weekend getaways, but Emily used mostly for Instagram photos. I didn't pick up. And I knew I never would again. I kept driving. The sky began to pale as I passed the sign. Welcome to California. Behind me was Portland. The house key I'd left behind. The birthdays that weren't fair. The cheap gifts wrapped in fake love. Ahead was an uncertain future, but at least one I could choose for myself. In the thin morning fog, I made a promise out loud. From now on, I'll never accept the value someone else tries to put on me. By the time my car turned off the freeway into San Francisco, the sun was already up, painting the hills and cable cars in warm golden light. The city opened up with steep streets, pastel houses pressed against each other, and the bay shimmering in the distance. I felt both thrilled and shaky. For the first time in my life, I wasn't heading back to Portland. I wasn't putting on the mask of the daughter who's always fine. I was starting a new life, though I had no idea what it would look like. My college best friend, Sophia, was the first to welcome me. The moment I texted that I was on my way, she replied right back. Come here. I'll always have a room for you. When I knocked on the door of her little apartment in Mission District, she hugged me tight. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled her tiny kitchen. It had been so long since I hugged someone without the weight of judgment or comparison hanging over me. I stayed with Sophia the first week. In the mornings, we walked together down graffiti-covered streets for coffee. At night, we sat on her worn sofa, talking until late. She didn't press me with questions. She didn't demand an explanation for leaving home. She just listened, and that alone made me feel less alone. But I knew I couldn't lean on her forever. I needed my own space. So I rented a small apartment, about 600 square feet, with a single west-facing window that looked out onto a narrow alley. Inside, there was almost nothing. A futon, a second-hand wooden table, a lamp I picked up at a garage sale. Empty and cold, yet to me it felt like a blank canvas, waiting to be filled. The first days were tough. After so many years living under the shadow of family, even if it was a dark one, the sudden quiet was disorienting. At night, with streetcars clanging outside and neon lights from the liquor store flickering through the window, I lay on the futon wondering if I'd made a mistake. Had I gone too far? Was I selfish for walking out on my parents and sister without a word? Fear mixed with hope. Part of me felt lost in a city too big, but another part felt lighter, finally free to decide for myself. Each morning, I brewed bitter coffee from the old machine Sophia lent me, sipping slowly, reminding myself that every new day was a chance to begin again. I started looking into transferring jobs. Luckily, the firm I worked for in Seattle had an office in San Francisco. I drafted the transfer request email over and over, nerves tying my stomach in knots. 3 days later, the approval came through. I'd be starting within the month. Just that single line of confirmation made me breathe easier. At least I had my career to hold on to. But work wasn't the only thing I needed. I had to learn how to fill the emptiness in my personal life too. Sophia, ever the enthusiast, dragged me to a community center near Civic Center. You need something that's not work, she said. So I signed up for pottery class. The first night, I sat in front of a lump of damp clay, my hands trembling. The instructor, an older woman with silver hair tied back, rested her hand lightly on my shoulder. Don't force it, she said. Let it become what it wants. I spun the wheel, the clay rising uneven, tilting, then collapsing into a mess. I burst out laughing. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. The final result was just a lopsided bowl, but it was mine. No one could deny it, no one could compare it. Other nights, I walked along the bay, watching the Golden Gate glow through the fog. The waves lapped gently, the salty air filling my lungs, making me feel small but free. And I realized, maybe I didn't need to run forever. Maybe I just needed a place to reshape myself. Sometimes my phone still lit up with missed calls from Portland. I let them ring out. Ignoring them was my reminder. I was building a new life, one that started right here, with a bare apartment, crooked bowls, and sunlight spilling through a small window. That was my beginning. Quiet. Imperfect. But truly mine. And deep down, I knew, from this ground I'd build a stronger home. Not with bricks or steel, but with my own worth, my own choices. In the weeks after moving to San Francisco, I started settling into a new rhythm. Work at the branch office was intense, but at least it kept me busy and reminded me I still mattered. During the day, I buried myself in technical drawings, calculating every steel beam, every concrete joint. But at night, when I came back to my small apartment with just a futon and that crooked clay bowl on the shelf, the emptiness hit hard. Sophia was patient with me. She dragged me everywhere: museums, weekend farmers markets, even a book club in the Mission District. But what changed me most was therapy. The first time I walked into Dr. Jacobs' office, I felt like I was about to take an exam. The room smelled faintly of old wood, sunlight pouring through the window onto the couch where I sat. Dr. Jacobs, a silver-haired woman with thin glasses, sat quietly, waiting. I stumbled through a few words, then fell silent. Finally, I blurted out, "Favoritism. My whole life, I've never been treated fairly." Saying it felt like dropping a stone I'd carried on my chest for years. Tears slipped down before I even noticed. Dr. Jacobs just nodded, her voice calm. "And that makes you feel?" I whispered, "like I'm only worth $2. From then on, I saw her every week. I learned how to notice my feelings instead of locking them away. I learned that saying no didn't make me selfish. Each session felt like peeling off another invisible chain that had bound me since childhood. At the same time, pottery class became another kind of healing. Every time I touched the cool clay, it felt like starting fresh. At first, my pieces were lopsided bowls and wobbly cups. But little by little, my hands grew steadier. Softer curves, smoother lines. On the windowsill, a row of cups, bowls, tiny vases began to line up, each one proof that I could shape something beautiful out of the mess. And then Ethan walked in. He was an environmental engineer at a company near my office. We met in the corner coffee shop I stopped at every morning. Tall, with loose brown curls and calm blue eyes. That day, I was just grabbing a latte to go, but he was joking with the barista about oat milk. I laughed, and he turned, smiling at me. The next morning, he was there again. This time, he spoke first. "Do you usually drink oat milk lattes, or was that just yesterday?" I stumbled over my words. "I drink anything with caffeine." He laughed, held out his hand. "I'm Ethan." I hesitated, then shook it. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. He asked me out for coffee after work. My instinct was to say no right away, years of rejecting help, rejecting affection. But then I remembered Dr. Jacobs' words. "Allow yourself to receive. It doesn't make you weak. It means you're worthy." Our first date was simple. We sat in a small cafe overlooking the bay, the sunset painting the water gold. Ethan talked about his work, his passion for sustainable projects. I listened, feeling like he was pulling me out of my shell. When he asked about me, I held back, only sharing a little about my job. I wasn't ready to open up fully. But his eyes didn't judge. They just waited. In the weeks that followed, we saw each other more. One time he took me to Golden Gate Park. We sat on the grass, shared sandwiches, and watched the red bridge fade into the fog. Another time, he came with me to pottery class, laughing so hard when his vase leaned like the Tower of Pisa. I started to believe I could be loved without having to prove anything. Ethan didn't expect me to be perfect. He was just there, steady, genuine. Not that it was always easy. One evening, he tried to hold my hand in public, and I pulled back without thinking. Ethan didn't get upset. He just nodded softly. "That's okay. Whenever you're ready." Those words made my eyes burn. I realized real love wasn't what I'd grown up with. It wasn't obligation. It wasn't comparison. It wasn't something you had to earn. Meanwhile, work in San Francisco started to take off. I was trusted with bigger projects. My colleagues respected what I could do. And each time I finished a complicated design, I thought, this is me. Clara. Not someone's shadow. Not just Emily's sister. Looking back now, I see it clearly. My healing didn't come only from therapy or from work. It came from daring to let people in, from daring to accept love. And for the first time, I believed I could build a future without asking permission, without proving anything to the family that had once left me behind. 7 months after that Christmas, a crisp white envelope showed up with fancy script. Vanessa Mark. My cousin was getting married. The wedding would be in Portland. I sat in my San Francisco apartment, staring at the invitation like it was a ticking bomb. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face my parents and Emily again. But this time, I wasn't the same. I had a new job. I had therapy. I had a life of my own. And most of all, I wasn't the daughter who stayed silent anymore. I prepared carefully. In my suitcase, along with a navy silk dress I'd had tailored, I packed an album I'd put together photos from birthdays, Christmases, graduations. Proof of the favoritism that had shaped decades. I printed copies of my student loan papers, $70,000 still hanging over me, and documents showing my parents had paid all of Emily's tuition plus her trip to Europe. And finally, I brought the cheap plastic piggy bank, now stuffed with $2 bills I'd collected every week since that night. At the rehearsal dinner, I walked into the fancy restaurant in downtown Portland. When the heavy wooden doors opened, every head turned. I stood tall, heels tapping steady on the floor. I saw my mom's hand fly to her mouth. My dad gripped his bourbon glass. Emily froze, her smile faltering. I didn't rush toward them. I nodded at relatives, shook hands with a few old friends. I wanted them to see me not as the outcast, but as an equal. It didn't take long. My mom asked to talk in private. They led me into a small library behind the restaurant, a dark wood room that smelled of leather and old liquor. 3 chairs sat on one side of the table, 1 chair alone on the other for me. This was clearly a planned family meeting. Dad started, his voice heavy. "Clara, this has gone too far. Families have to stay united. We've had enough gossip." I sat down, opened my suitcase, pulled out the photo album. I flipped to the first page. Emily's 5th birthday ponies and a bounce castle. Next page, my 6th birthday Safeway cake in the kitchen, 2 classmates sitting beside me. "This is the truth I lived with," I said, calm but steady. I flipped more pages. My graduation photo, family seats empty. The soccer flyer for Emily's game the same day. Then my student loan statement, $70,000 still unpaid. And finally, documents proving they covered Emily's tuition and trip abroad. Dad's face turned red. We did the best we could with the money we had. I met his eyes. "No, Dad. You got promoted when I was 16. Grandma's inheritance came right before college. You had money. You just chose not to spend it on me." The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Mom stood, trembling, tears sliding down. "We never meant to hurt you." I set the plastic piggy bank on the table. The hollow sound made them all jump. I opened the lid and poured out a pile of $2 bills, covering the table. "I've saved one every week since Christmas. This isn't about money. It's about the value you decided I was worth." Emily picked one up, her hands shaking. She whispered, "I never saw it from your side. I've never had to stand on my own." My dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You're tearing this family apart." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, but my voice stayed even. "No, Dad. This family was broken a long time ago. I'm just the first one to stop pretending." Mom sobbed. Emily lowered her head. I stood, packed the album and piggy bank back into my suitcase, leaving the $2 bills spread across the table. "I don't want apologies or empty promises. If you really want to fix this, there are 2 conditions: family therapy and respect for my boundaries." Dad started to protest, but Mom touched his arm. Her voice was tired, but clear. "Fine. We'll do it. As long as there's still a chance to have our daughter back." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I nodded. Not in agreement, but to acknowledge they'd finally heard me. I turned toward the door, hand on the knob. Before leaving, I stopped. "You can keep the money. Let every $2 bill remind you if the favoritism continues, the cost won't just be paper. The door shut behind me. I let out a long breath, like setting down a boulder I'd carried for 34 years. For the first time, I walked away standing tall, not begging for permission to exist in my family. In the hall, I spotted Sophia waiting, holding a glass of water. She met my eyes and whispered, "You just did what most people never find the courage to do." I smiled, lips trembling but heart steady. That night, under the glow of wedding lights, I knew I had reached the peak of my journey. I was no longer the shadow in my family. I was me. In the weeks after the wedding, I went back to San Francisco with mixed feelings. On one hand, I felt lighter, finally having spoken the truth. On the other, I couldn't stop wondering, would my family really change, or were those just promises made in the heat of the moment? Slowly, the news started coming. First from Emily. One night, she called on video, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes. The Mercedes, they took it back. I'm drowning in debt. All my design clients left. Her voice cracked, stripped of all arrogance. For the first time, I saw how fragile she really was. I didn't rush to save her like I used to. Instead, I answered calmly but sincerely. That sounds really tough, Emily. You've got to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. But if you want, I can help you set up a budget. That was the difference. I could care without carrying her burdens for her. A month later, I heard from a relative that Dad had started going to AA meetings. His nightly drinking had always fueled his temper, but now he was trying to rein it in. Emily even sent me a photo of his 90 days sober certificate. I stared at it, unsure how much I could trust it, but at least it was a start. Mom was changing in her own way. She signed up to volunteer at the local community center, handing out food to the homeless. I didn't hear it from her, but from my aunt. Maybe Mom wasn't ready to tell me herself. Still, I knew what it meant. She was trying to find balance, instead of clinging to the role of emotional gatekeeper. As for me, work in San Francisco was thriving. I got promoted to project manager, leading my first major build, a sustainable office building near the Embarcadero. Every morning, driving across the Bay Bridge and watching the sunrise over the water, I felt it deep inside. I was finally free from the weight of the past. Emily and I kept a habit of calling once a month. Those talks weren't about bragging anymore. They were about real life. She shared stories from her part-time cafe job. I told her about my new pottery class. We weren't close yet, but we had something healthier than before, something I once thought would never exist. Looking back, I realized standing up at the wedding hadn't just changed me. It forced my whole family to face themselves. Dad couldn't keep using money to control. Mom couldn't keep using tears to manipulate. And Emily couldn't lean on privilege without learning independence. And me? I finally understood. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges, safe, steady connections. Only when I claimed my own worth did my family have no choice but to face it, too. A year after that Christmas Eve in Portland, I sat in my little San Francisco apartment, sunlight pouring through the window on a winter afternoon. The simple wooden table had turned into the gathering place for what I now called my chosen family. Sophia, a few close coworkers, and Ethan, the man who had walked beside me through every step of healing. From the oven, a turkey filled the air with rosemary and sage. On the shelves, my lopsided pottery bowls sat alongside newer, smoother pieces, each one shaped by my own hands. Laughter and conversation filled the room. No tension, no comparisons, no one fighting to prove their worth. I listened as Sophia raised her glass. To Clara, the woman who knows how to build bridges, not just with steel and concrete, but with courage and persistence. My cheeks burned, but my heart felt light. A year ago, I never would have believed I'd be sitting here in this moment. On the bookshelf, the cheap plastic piggy bank was still there. But instead of a couple crumpled bills, it held stacks of $2 notes I'd been collecting, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that my worth would never again be defined by someone else's gift. Only by what I chose to accept and what I chose to refuse. My phone buzzed. A video call from Emily. I answered, seeing her in a small apartment, looking tired but real. After a few holiday wishes, she held up a gift. A clumsy little clay ornament, streaked with uneven paint. I made this in pottery class. It's not pretty, but I want you to have it. I laughed, for the first time in years, without bitterness. It's beautiful in its own way, Emily. Thank you. Later, when the party ended, I stepped out onto the balcony. The San Francisco Bay shimmered with lights from the bridge. Ethan draped a blanket around my shoulders. And in that moment, a truth rang clear inside me. My worth doesn't come from being the daughter who's always fine or the sister who's responsible. My worth comes from knowing I deserve love, respect, and never settling for less. That Christmas, I lost the family I was born into. But a year later, I found something greater. I found myself.